Good evening, and welcome to Nox Historia. Tonight, we travel to the world of Hattusa. So put the day down somewhere and leave it. It has taken what it was going to take and has no further business with you. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your jaw come unclenched. Let the breath go long and low, the way it goes when you are warm and nobody needs anything from you. We are going somewhere high tonight, and windy, and colder than the room you are lying in, worth imagining only because it makes this bed feel better. In here, nothing reaches you. We are traveling to Hattusa, capital of the Hittites, in north-central Anatolia, in the 13th century before the Common Era. Call it a night not long after 1300 BCE. The great king is Hattusili III of that name, holding the throne by the usual reckoning from around 1267 to 1237, alongside his queen Puduhepa, a priestess before she was a queen, who wrote to the pharaoh of Egypt in her own name. Bronze Age dates come with a shrug built into them. What matters is the distance, roughly 3,300 years back from where your head is resting. And remember which way these numbers run. They count down toward zero. So 1267 comes after 1300, not before. And here is something most people never learn. Buried under this hill are something like 25,000 clay tablets and fragments, and the language pressed into most of them is the oldest Indo-European language anyone has ever been able to read, older than Sanskrit, older than the Greek of Homer by 500 years, older than Latin by 1,000. While Egypt was raising columns for Ramesses, the people asleep in these houses were speaking a far-off cousin of the language you are thinking in right now. And the first sentence a modern person ever read aloud in it was about bread and water. You do not need to remember any of this. If you happen to fall asleep, that is exactly what this is for. So, come up onto the plateau with me. We arrive at dusk on foot from the north. High country, bare rolling upland inside the great loop of the river the Hittites called the Marasantia, now the Kizilirmak, the Red River. Stubble and pale grass and long gray shelves of limestone breaking through where the soil gives up. Nothing to stop the wind, which comes across in slow, steady pushes, carrying dust and dried thyme and the smell of animals coming in. Even in high summer, the nights up here want a blanket. The last of the sun is on the ridge ahead, going from gold to rose to a tired copper. Somewhere below, a dog barks twice and thinks better of it. And then the city stands up out of the slope. It does not sit on a plain the way a capital ought to. It climbs. The lowest gates are on flat ground, and the highest wall is nearly 300 meters above them, riding the ridge, so the whole place is tilted towards you like something being offered. Around it runs more than 6 kilometers of wall. Not one wall, but two, an inner skin and an outer skin, each about 3 meters thick, with a gap of 2 meters between, towers every 20 to 25 paces the entire way. The bottom courses are great-shaped boulders. Everything above is mud brick, laced with timber, plastered smooth and washed pale, so the upper wall glows faintly, while the footings have already gone dark. The crown of it is the rampart later named Yerkapu, an artificial mountain of packed fill, 250 meters long, 80 wide at the base, 15 high, faced all down its outer slope with fitted limestone that holds the light like a slab of frozen milk. Elsewhere, lions cut into the jambs of one gate, a tall carved figure in the stone of another. You pass under one of them now, through a gap 3 meters wide between the doorposts, and the wind stops all at once, the way it does when you step into a hallway. Come down into the streets.
The oldest quarter is the Lower Kitty, a rough rectangle about 1/4 of a kilometre long and half a kilometre across, first walled by an earlier Hattusili nearly 400 years before tonight. The lanes are narrow and unpaved, and they follow the hill rather than arguing with it, so you are always slightly climbing or descending. Houses shoulder to shoulder, stone footings a metre high, mud brick above, flat beaten roofs on poplar beams, a ladder at almost every doorway, because the roof is where you dry things and sleep in summer. Doorways are low, thresholds worn into shallow dishes, and there are domed bread ovens in the yards, still giving off the last of the day's heat. The walls hold perhaps 10,000 people on an ordinary night, over roughly 180 hectares. Up the slope behind you, in the upper city, archaeologists have dug out more than 24 temples. Some counts run past 30. A startling ratio until you understand what a Hittite temple actually was. Because a temple here is a warehouse. The great one in the lower city is simply called Temple 1. The sanctuary at its heart is small and dim and reserved. Ringing it on the ground floor alone are 82 rooms, and since most carried a second and sometimes a third story above, the estimate for the whole complex runs to 200 storerooms. Walk between them in the dark, and your shoulder brushes doorframe after doorframe. Sunk into thick clay floors, in 2 long rows, stand the storage jars. Not jars as you picture them. Pithoi taller than a man, some holding 2,000 litres apiece, set so deep that only the shoulders and mouths show, like a row of enormous eggs half buried. Around the rim of many, somebody has scratched marks. How much it holds, what is in it, whose it is. Grain, oil, wine, honey. The gods of Hatti are landlords. This is the rent, and the priests are also the ministry of storage. Which brings us to the thing under the ground. In 1999, the excavators here opened what they took for a building and found a pit, a deliberate one, cut into the slope, 118 meters long, 33 to 40 meters wide, about the footprint of a football pitch, divided into 32 separate chambers, each filled and sealed and emptied on its own. The whole complex could take 7,000 to 9,000 cubic meters, somewhere between 5.5 and 7,000 tons of grain, enough to feed 20,000 or 30,000 people for a year. And the method is beautiful. You pour in the barley, the emmer, the einkorn, hulled wheats still in their little jackets. You cover the mouth and seal it. The top layer sprouts, breathes the trapped air, and dies. With the oxygen used up, everything beneath it goes to sleep. No weevils, no rot, no mold. Chemical work on one burnt store told the archaeologists something else. The grain inside had grown on many different farms in many different soils. Gathered in from all over, the earliest kind of tax, carried up the hill in sacks, poured into the dark, put to bed for the winter. There is water here, too, quieter than you would think. The Hittites did not pipe it in from outside. They went down for it. Cut into the eastern and southern slopes are great rectangular basins dug into a natural marl so dense it holds water unlined. The eastern group could take some 36,000 cubic meters.
the southern around 20,000. They go down as much as 8 meters, and the depth is the whole trick. Less surface for the summer's sun to steal from. Groundwater seeps up to them slowly through the wet months, and they fill without a single splash. Standing beside one at nightfall, you wouldn't know it was there but for the flatness. A long black rectangle holding the first stars, absolutely still.
Spring smattered here beyond their usefulness. Water rising out of the ground was holy, a place where the world underneath touched this one, and the kings built stone-lined pools beside them and left offerings at the lip. Nobody drank from those. Now turn in at a doorway. A stone step, worn hollow, a timber lintel low enough that you duck. Inside a small open court with the sky still faintly blue above it, and rooms leading off, 3, 4, packed close, the mud brick thick enough that the temperature drops the moment you cross the threshold, and then steadies. Big jars stand along one wall on their own clay collars. A quern sits on a low bench. Bundled herbs hang from a peg. It smells of dry earth and wool and yesterday's bread. The hearth is in the main room, and it is doing everything. A shallow curbed basin set into the floor, the fire in it small and disciplined, brushwood and dried dung, banked low, giving off far more light than heat. Beside it a single lamp, a clay saucer pinched into a spout at one edge, a twist of flax wick lying in a pool of oil, a flame the size of a thumbnail. It is enough. The whitewash goes honey-colored, and the ceiling beams throw long, soft bars of shadow that lean when the flame leans. And the hearth is not only a hearth. In the ritual texts of this people, when the holy things of a house are named and called to witness, the hearth is named among them. Fire in a room is a presence. You do not let it go out. Supper, then. Bread first, always. The Hittites had a vocabulary for bread that would embarrass a modern bakery. Well over 100 kinds are named in the tablets, sorted by shape, by flour, by size, by purpose. Thick loaves, thin loaves, loaves torn rather than cut, little sweet ones made with honey. Some existed only to be broken over an altar and were never eaten by anybody. Tonight it is a flat round of coarse emmer, baked against the hot wall of the yard oven, torn while it still steams a little when it opens. With it, barley porridge, sheep's cheese, an onion, chickpeas cooked soft, figs that have been drying on the roof since summer, honey if the household keeps bees, and a good many do. The Hittite law codes set out what you owe a man whose hive you have taken. And beer, which is barley bread's other life, cloudy, low, faintly sour, drunk through the day the way you might drink tea. Nobody eats quickly. Elsewhere in the city this same evening, a man sits cross-legged with a board across his knees and a lump of clay in his hands. He wets it, works it, pats it into a smooth tablet the size of a hand, and takes up a reed cut to a wedge at one end, and then he begins to press. Not scratch, press, so that each mark is a small triangular dent with a tail, and the marks group into signs, and the signs run in lines across the face. This is cuneiform, and it is worth saying plainly, because a great many people get it wrong. Cuneiform is not a language. It is a way of writing, borrowed wholesale from Mesopotamia centuries earlier, used here for Hittite and several other tongues besides. The archives on this hill hold tablets in at least 8 languages. The borrowing left fossils behind. When our scribe wants the word for bread, he does not spell it out in Hittite. He presses the old Sumerian sign, Ninda, and reads it aloud in his own language, the way you write an ampersand and say and. His shelves are organized. Small round clay labels sit in front of each series with the title written on them,
and there are catalogue tablets and shelf lists of what is meant to be kept and recopied. Library cataloguing, 3,000 years before libraries. When he finishes a tablet, he signs it in a little block of text at the end called a colophon. One of them reads, "The hand of Tarhuntazidi, son of Pidda, written under the supervision of Anuvanza." That is all of what we know about him. And it is nothing. Much of the daily work never survived because much of it was done on wax-coated wooden boards, wiped clean and used again. Wax and wood are gone, only the clay stayed. Which is how we know any of this at all. For most of recorded history, the Hittites were a rumor, a handful of lines in the Hebrew Bible, a handful of names, and a general assumption that they were some small local people of no consequence. Then, in 1906, a German scholar named Hugo Winkler, working with the Ottoman archaeologist Theodor Macready, put spades into this hill and pulled up thousands of tablets, and the small local people turned out to have been a great power, writing to Egypt and Babylon as an equal. They never called themselves Hittites, by the way. That name is ours, taken from the Bible. Their land was Hatti. Their language, they said, was Neshili, the tongue of Nessa, after the city they came from. But nobody could read the Hittite ones, not until the 24th of November, 1915, when a Czech linguist named Bedřich Hrozný stood up in Berlin and read out a sentence he had cracked. Roughly, "Nu nindan ezateni, watar ma ekutani." Now you will eat bread and you will drink water. He had spotted watar, water, Wasser, and ezateni, eat, essen, edere, the oldest written Indo-European in the world, and the first thing it ever said to us was an offer of supper. Those tablets went on to UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in 2001, and they are still being read, because there is more clay than there are Hittitologists to read it. Back in the house, the evening is settling into its own shape. Someone is spinning, wool drawn out and the spindle turning on the floor, that small wooden click and hum you stop noticing after a minute. Someone else is mending a strap. Talk has gone slow and half-finished, the way talk does at this hour. Long gaps between sentences, nobody minding. They are counting towards spring. The great turning of the year here is a festival called the Tahums, named after a plant, most likely a crocus, that comes up as soon as the ground softens. When the plant appears, the festival begins. It ran at least 38 days, the king and queen moving town to town, shrine to shrine, and the priests kept outline tablets, setting it all out day by day. A whole imperial calendar hung on a flower. Out on that dark plateau, the crocuses are underground right now, in the cold, doing nothing, waiting. Above it all stand what the Hittites called the 1,000 gods of Hatti, the storm god, the sun goddess of Arena, and hundreds more collected from every people they ever met, because it never occurred to them that another nation's god might not be real. The lamp is guttering, time to lie down. Bedding here is simple, a mat, a folded cloth, sheepskins or a wool blanket that smells of the animal and of the smoke it has hung in. People sleep close on the floor, near the hearth in winter, on the roof in summer. The fire is banked, ash drawn over the embers so they keep until morning. The lamp goes out with a small dry sound and a thread of oily smoke, and the room becomes only warmth and breathing and the mineral smell of mud brick. Outside, the wind has dropped, the way it often does up here after dark. Stand in the doorway a moment. The sky over this plateau has nothing to compete with, no glow on any horizon, not for 100 miles, not for another 3,000 years, so the stars come down almost to the roofline, thick and cold and absolutely steady. The city below is a field of dark rectangles with a red seam of light under a door here and there. And this is the country that told the story of Telepinu.
He was a god of growing things, and one morning he woke in a mood. So foul a mood that he put his boots on the wrong feet. That detail survives 3,500 years because someone thought it was funny and wrote it down. Then he walked out. He went off across the country in a temper until he was tired and lay down in a meadow and fell asleep. And while he slept, everything stopped. The grain would not come. The ewes would not lamb. The trees held their leaves and gave nothing. So the gods went looking. The sun sent an eagle to quarter the whole world from above, and the eagle came back with nothing. The storm god went out after his own son and failed and came home. Then Hanahana, the grandmother goddess, the oldest of them, said, "Send a bee." A bee? But the bee went out and searched the meadows one by one and found him, asleep in the long grass, where the eagle's eyes and the storm's whole strength had missed him entirely. And when Telepinu came home, and the goddess Komrusepa had soothed the temper out of him, they set up an evergreen tree in front of him, and hung a sheep's fleece from it. And into that fleece, the tablet says, they put long years, and children, and the fat of the flock, and grain, and wine, and the growth of everything. That is what this civilization chose to tell itself at the end of a long day, a story about a god who fell asleep, and how badly the world needed him back, and how it was the smallest creature anybody sent that found him. They are all asleep now. The scribe with his shelves of labeled clay, the priest who counted the jars, the household under the sheepskins with the ash drawn over the fire. Nobody here knows their language will be lost for 3,000 years and then handed back, or that in our own century a stretch of that mud-brick wall will be raised again on its original footings, 65 meters of it, 2,700 tons of earth, so people can stand up there in the same wind and lay a hand on the same kind of brick. They are simply asleep, in the cold and the quiet, on the high plateau, as you, perhaps, are sleeping now. The embers are settling. Down in the dark under the storerooms, 32 sealed chambers of barley are keeping perfectly still, and there is no hurry anywhere in the whole city. So let go of the last of it, whatever you are still holding. It has no claim on you tonight. Let your hands go heavy. Let your breath go slow. There is nothing to answer, nothing to carry, nothing left to finish. Sleep well, and when you are ready to travel again, Nox Historia will be waiting. Good night.